Hey, this is Walt from Raybuck Auto Body Parts. Today we're going to take a look at our rocker panel and cab corner installation, as well as our repair to the floor section. Starting with the finished product, because I lost some of the footage from the beginning when I originally cut out and replaced the rockers, so I just wanted to start and show you how it turned out. And then we'll show you the rest of the video with the cutting out and the installation of the rockers. As you can see, it's in gray primer right now. We will be touching that up with the green and maybe like a little bit of red oxide, something to try and mimic a little bit of the old weathered look. But what we ended up doing with this side was replacing the upper portion of the rocker. I didn't cut the whole rocker out. I basically cut it right here and just basically put the cap of the rocker on, as well as the cab corner, the inner floor section, the inner rocker, and as you can see on that side, we did the kick panel, which had to be done on this side as well. So it actually went pretty well. The panels fit real nice, so all our our lines and everything lined up real good. So we're not going to really do much in the way of finishing the area under the floor. We're going to be putting carpet or a rubber mat back in it, so not really concerned about finishing those welds up. Even in the rocker areas here, probably just use some seam sealer and then paint all this. The cab corner on this side was bad. The other side was not bad, so the other side we didn't have to do the cab corner. We just kind of did a similar repair to the rocker in the outer floor section. This cab corner was hit real bad, and it looked like somebody had tried to pull it out, so there was a bunch of holes and it just caused it to rot real bad. So we ended up changing that. While we were in here, we did the whole inner rocker and had to fix the rear cab support as well. That had some rot in it, so kind of one of those things, like as usual with rust, once you get into it, it usually turns into a little more than what you expected. But it turned out pretty well. Like I said, we're trying to leave the original outer appearance of the truck, so I didn't want to get into that outer rocker, so we just left that, so that looks pretty much untouched from the outside. And like I said, we'll figure out how we're gonna kind of touch up that cab corner to make it blend in. But that's it for the finished product. We'll start off now with the video of how I cut it out and did the installation. Alright, so here's the passenger side rocker we're working on, and as you can see, there's quite a bit of rust on this side. Did have to cut out more of the rocker and inner and outer cab corner than I had planned on, but once I got in there, there was a lot more rust than I thought. As you can see, there is the very back of the floor section here where that inner rocker or outer cab floor attaches. And this is a shot of the driver's side that I had already completed. This did not need as much work as the passenger side. Just a small portion of the rocker and outer floor section and a little bit of that kick panel. This was the underside of that, and you can see wherever the welds are, that's pretty much all I had to replace. So back onto the passenger side. This outer floor section had to be cut in two pieces in order to get it in, because the pillar for the pillar and the rocker are already in there. It makes it difficult to get that in one piece. Once I got in there and started cutting away at the inner rocker, the cab support was bad as well, so I had to replace the end of that. And actually, that by cutting that end off, it made it a lot easier to get that outer floor section in there and get that welded in the way it should be. These trucks are meant to go together in a certain way, and typically they go from the inside out. The floor goes in, the pillars go in, the rockers go in, all those pieces go in. So trying to do that kind of backwards or in the middle of it, the way it normally goes, is kind of difficult because it's kind of like a big puzzle. So getting this cab corner, or sorry, the cab mount cut out and replaced was took a little bit more time, but actually made the whole thing a little bit easier. As you can see, pretty much everything I welded is just a bunch of tack welds. Anytime you're welding sheet metal, or in this case sheet metal that has a little bit of rust on it, it's always best to do a bunch of tack welds rather than trying to run one long weld. Typically, if you try to run a long weld, as you go along, the metal gets hotter and hotter, and eventually will just keep blowing through. This is a picture of the cab corner that was on there, and you can see here where the outer floor section is back in place in the back and how that welded in. Here's a mock-up of the cab corner. Usually with these cab corners or any panel, you try to cut it a little large and then cut it down to fit. I didn't do the best job of fitting it. I thought I had it pretty close, but then I realized I had something kind of wrong and tried to adjust it, and I had already cut it a little too much, but just meant that I would have to put a lot of weld in there, which you usually don't like to do because it causes distortion to the panel. But in this case, I wasn't too concerned about it since it is an old truck. It was going to stay that way. This area is not going to get any type of body work or anything like that. So just basically welding and hammering until you get it to where you want it. And there's the finished weld. That doesn't look very pretty, but as you'll see, the grinder will take care of that. Typically grinding these welds, again, you don't want to put too much heat into the panel. If this were like a long quarter panel or something, you may cause some warpage. But here we started off with a stone wheel, and I use a series of discs and kind of whatever you need to get the job done. A flapper wheel actually works really good for this as well. So with it all ground down, it actually was not too bad. Not, as I said, we're not going to paint this, or we're going to paint it. We're not going to do any body work on it. So pretty much the way it is how it's going to stay. And it actually didn't come out too bad, just a little uneven. Back to the rocker and floor repair. Getting these spot welds out takes a good bit of time. Pretty much just to locate all of them. With all the years of dirt and rust and everything, sometimes it's hard to find them, but best way is just to, once you locate the spot weld, use a center punch, and that'll be a good place to locate your spot weld cutter and just drill them out. I am using one of our professional spot weld cutters. These work really well as compared to just the standard ones. They last a lot longer and just cut better. It is helpful to use some lubricant with them. We do sell a lubricant for them, but I didn't have any at the time, so I just used just some spray lubricant to keep it cool and help it cut. And this is a shot of the kick panel area and the floor. This did have a bit more rust than I anticipated. And again, this is another tricky place where you have about 4 different panels that come together. So trying to cut something out and put a piece in doesn't really want to go together the way it's supposed to, because in this area, usually the floor went in and then the kick panel and then the outer pillar. So it all kind of sandwiches together right there. Did have to make some additional cuts in the floor and patching some pieces in there, which was kind of unexpected. So we got everything tacked or mocked up and tacked in. As you can see, I used those little, I don't know what they call them, little holders for the panels, and those work pretty well. They do kind of make a little bit large gap, but they do the job. Again, the welds aren't the prettiest, but this will be under some type of flooring, so not really concerned about it. They would have been much better if my gaps were a little tighter, but fitting this stuff up is a little tricky sometimes, and sometimes you just don't get it quite right. But this is with the welds. I didn't grind them all the way down since they're going to be covered, and just put a little bit of paint on them. And you can see where the top of the rocker is going in. This was kind of tricky. I probably wouldn't recommend doing it this way. It's probably better to replace the whole rocker. But in my case, I wanted to keep that outer rocker looking original, so I chose to do it this way. It just made this, getting that edge at the end of the door there was kind of difficult. I think it is a little bit wavy because you're trying to create that original like contour there, and it's hard to do it when you have two pieces coming together at like a 90-degree angle like that. So if I had to do it again and I wasn't concerned about, you know, leaving the outside of the rocker, I would probably just take that whole rocker out and replace it. Again, a lot of tack welds, jumping around just to minimize heat and distortion. And there's the rocker with all the tacks in. This is after I finished welding the outer portion of the rocker, and as you can see, it kind of has a sharp edge where it should be a little bit more rounded. That did take a little bit more work to kind of get that smoothed out like that. This is the inner kick panel on the floor. As you can see, a bunch of patches had to be put in there.